Our next unit of study is ancient Egypt. As we study or begin to study it, we need to make sure we understand the geography. First, Egypt is located on the continent of Africa. It is located in the northeastern hemisphere of our world, meaning it is north of the equator and it is east of the prime meridian. I have a map right here that is zoomed in on Egypt, so we need to pay particularly close to the Nile River because the Nile River is very important to Egypt. You will notice that the Nile River comes from the White Nile River and the Blue Nile River. As you travel north along the river, you end up into the Mediterranean Sea. One thing that's very interesting about the Nile is that if you look at the orange arrows, it flows northward. So as you're traveling up the Nile, you actually hit a region called Upper Egypt, and then you hit another region called Lower Egypt. Okay? East of the Nile is the Eastern Desert. West of the Nile is the Western Desert. Now, one thing I want to make sure you understand is these red markings on the Nile, those are cataracts. Cataracts are rapids along the Nile. Cataracts make sailing very difficult on the Nile. As you reach Lower Egypt, you have what's called the Nile Delta. The delta is a triangle-shaped area of land made from soil deposited by a river. Some 2/3 of Egypt's fertile farmland is located in this Nile Delta region. One thing you need to understand is most area of fertile farmland that's found in Egypt is very close to the Nile River, the most fertile being in the Nile Delta area. The Nile River was very important to Egypt. It was so important that Egypt was actually called the Gift of the Nile. The Nile River is the longest river in the world and it has very predictable flooding seasons. The 3 seasons of the Nile are season of going out, where flood waters recede, exposing fertile farmland. This is when farmers then plant and tend their crops. Then you have the season of harvest, where farmers harvest their crops. That yields a large surplus that lasts an entire year. So harvest means they actually go in, get the crops, get everything they have, and they actually have enough food to last them the entire year. Then you have the season of flood spring. Silt is carried downstream, which provide farmers with rich silt. So you can see it's this cycle, okay, the 3 seasons of the Nile. Ancient Egypt developed along a 750-mile stretch of the Nile River. Originally, ancient Egypt was organized into 2 regions, Upper and Lower Egypt. We just saw them on the map. Upper Egypt is the southern region of Egypt, remember, because the Nile flows northward. The Nile in Upper Egypt has 5 cataracts. Remember, those cataracts are those rapids. These cataracts make up the southern border of Upper Egypt. The Nile floods in midsummer, bringing silt to this region. We also have Lower Egypt as the second region of Egypt. That's the northern region of Egypt, which is near the Nile Delta. So it is centered in the Nile Delta. The Nile floods in the fall, bringing silt to this region. The Nile River is very important to Egypt. It provides water for drinking and growing crops. Cataracts near the Upper Egypt kept out enemies, so it actually protects them. The marshy delta in Lower Egypt kept also enemies out from coming in around the Mediterranean Sea. The Mediterranean Sea is also very important because it actually allowed Egypt to trade with other outside parts of the world, making them very wealthy and being able to get goods or crops that they could not grow in that area of the world.